Picture a Friday night. Most people are winding down, phones dimming, conversations fading, the world slowly surrendering to sleep. But somewhere, quietly, someone is just beginning. The fog in their mind lifts, their thoughts sharpen. Something that felt impossible at 2 p.m. suddenly becomes effortless at 2 a.m. If you've ever felt more like yourself after midnight than you do at noon, if daylight has always felt slightly performative, slightly borrowed, then this video was made for you, because neuroscience and psychology have a lot to say about why some people seem to come alive when the rest of the world goes dark. Let's start with something important. If you feel most alert, most creative, or most at peace in the late hours of the night, that does not mean you are broken. It doesn't mean you are avoidant, self-destructive, antisocial, or failing at adulthood. Society runs on a schedule, but that schedule was never designed around human neurology. It was designed around sunlight, agriculture, and industrial productivity. And you, quietly, have never quite fit inside it. That's not a flaw in your character. It may simply be a feature of how your brain is wired. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Chronobiology, a scientific study of biological time, has established that human beings don't all operate on the same internal clock. Researchers, including those working out of institutions like Harvard's Division of Sleep Medicine and the University of Surrey, have documented significant variation in what's called the circadian rhythm, the roughly 24-hour biological cycle that governs everything from body temperature to cortisol release to cognitive performance. For most people, this rhythm peaks in the morning and tapers by evening, but for a meaningful portion of the population, the entire cycle is shifted later. These individuals, sometimes classified as having an evening chronotype, experience their neurological peak hours well after the world expects them to be finishing up for the day. This isn't a preference exactly. It's more like a signature. Your core body temperature rises later. Your melatonin release is delayed. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of complex thought, pattern recognition, and emotional nuance, reaches its sharpest window somewhere between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., sometimes later. When you feel more awake at night, you're not imagining it. You are, in a measurable neurological sense, more awake. The rest of the world is experiencing the natural decline of their cognitive resources precisely when yours are beginning to gather momentum. There is also something worth noting about dopamine. The brain's reward system, particularly the pathways connected to novelty, curiosity, and creative exploration, tends to be more disinhibited at night for evening-type individuals. The noise of the day quiets. The social obligations dissolve. What's left is a kind of mental clarity that many night-oriented people describe as the only time they truly feel like themselves. Research from the University of Toronto, published around 2012, found that evening chronotypes, while often stigmatized as lazy or undisciplined, actually displayed higher levels of creative thinking when tested during their natural performance window. The same people who seem foggy and disengaged at 9 a.m. may be operating at a genuinely elevated cognitive level 6 hours later. Now, it's worth pausing to understand the other side. Morning people aren't simply the default because of cultural bias, though culture certainly reinforces them. Early chronotypes have historically had structural advantages in societies built around daylight activity. There is also something psychologically grounding about being synchronized with social rhythms, shared morning routines, collective productivity hours, predictable sleep schedules. These things create a kind of social coherence that provides real psychological benefits. People who thrive in the morning often describe a sense of control, of being ahead, of moving in alignment with the visible world. That's a genuinely meaningful experience. The morning-oriented person is not performing virtue. They are living in sync with a system that was, quite literally, built around them. What differs for the night-oriented person is not the quality of their inner life. It's the timing and texture of it. Where others find their sense of self in the shared momentum of daylight hours, the night person often constructs identity in solitude, in depth, in the undisturbed hours that belong to no one but themselves. There is something quietly stabilizing about this. When the world is not watching, when there are no social cues to perform against, who you are becomes much clearer. Many people who feel most alive at night report that those hours aren't just productive. They're the hours where they feel most honest, most unguarded, most real. How someone arrives at a nocturnal orientation varies widely and should never be collapsed into a single explanation. For some, it is purely genetic. Chronotype has a strong heritable component, and if you had a parent who stayed up reading long after the house went quiet, You may simply have inherited their clock. For others, the night became meaningful through experience. A childhood spent in a noisy household where quiet only arrived after everyone else fell asleep, or years of creative or intellectual work that gradually rewired the association between darkness and freedom. For some, it's introversion seeking recovery from a day spent navigating social demand. For others still, it's simply aesthetic, a genuine love of stillness, of the specific quality of 3 a.m. silence, of being one of the few lights on in a sleeping neighborhood. None of these origins are more legitimate than another. All of them are real. There are fundamentally different ways people extract meaning from time. Some people find meaning through participation, being present in the shared rhythms of communal life, moving through daylight hours in visible, socially legible ways. Others find meaning through depth, not in what they share with the world, but in what they discover alone in the hours when no one is measuring them. Neither orientation is superior. They are simply different architectures of inner life. The risk for the night person is accepting a framework of meaning that was never built for them, and measuring their worth against a standard that doesn't account for when they are actually running. Here is something worth sitting with. Psychologists studying identity and self-concept have noted that people with strong evening chronotypes often report a higher degree of introspective awareness, a more developed relationship with their own internal states. One possible explanation: when you spend years slightly out of sync with the dominant schedule, you are forced to develop a more conscious relationship with your own rhythms. You learn, often early, that you cannot blindly follow external cues for when to work, when to rest, when to feel sharp. You have to know yourself in a more deliberate way. That kind of self-knowledge, built out of necessity, tends to run deep. It may be one reason why night people so often gravitate toward philosophy, art, writing, or any pursuit that rewards patient, internal attention. The dissonance of existing on a different clock can quietly build a more textured inner world. So if you have always felt slightly alien in a world that starts without you, if mornings feel like costumes you never quite fit into, and the deepest version of yourself only emerges when the rest of the world has gone quiet, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not failing to be a functioning human being. You are simply someone whose mind operates on a different timeline. And within that timeline, in those quiet hours that belong entirely to you, something real is happening. You're not missing out on the day. You're living inside a different one. If this kind of psychology resonates with you, it's exactly what we explore on the Glitch Psychology, the quiet science behind the people who never quite fit the default settings.